Hi there, all you cats and kittens. Nowstalgia Pod coming at you, giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger, still social distancing and quarantining himself. Dave, how you doing?
Did not watch Tiger King. Only person left holding out, distancing myself from that content. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Tiger King was a good way to fill some time, and that seems like mostly what we're doing at this point, because we're still not getting much. Luckily, though, we had a pretty solid music week to talk about, as well as a couple of Netflix things. So we're gonna be diving into all that. But before we do, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube to support us. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod and give us a follow there, and listen to the podcast any way you want to, and also 5-star rating and review. Always appreciated. Dave, what made you not want to watch Tiger King?
Well, the thing about Tiger King is it's like a viral Netflix phenomenon, and that's why everyone cares, because it's a viral thing on Netflix that everyone's talking about. You know, this happens all the time. Ever since like Making a Murderer, something else I didn't bother watching. I don't know. I think it's kind of like quote unquote true crime. I just don't really have a lot of interest in. And I feel like it's kind of just better if you just read the story, especially if there's like a good report out there, like you get the idea. But also, like, I feel like people are like quote unquote lionizing, tigerizing parts of Joe Exotic to a certain extent, which I just don't support, of course, because he's like a piece of shit to animals. So yeah, not really my bag. But I'm definitely in the minority on that one, as the Netflix top 10 will let you know.
Yeah, which is a nice little feature that they've added, and I've been paying a little bit more attention to the top 10. However, I agree. I think the viralness and the sensationalizing around this is definitely playing a part into the popularity. But unlike Making a Murderer, where you have the story, and like you said, you can get some really good reporting or like a good in-depth picture into this. Tiger King had so many parts to it that if you didn't see certain aspects of it, you almost wouldn't believe it. This is possibly the most ridiculous story ever told. Just it's Joe Exotic is the type of character that if I just kept telling you details about this person before you knew it was a real thing, you would probably tell someone to like tone that character back that you're writing, because it's just too ridiculous. Like
Right.
this
We
guy
have some notes.
Right. If is as Dave's talking, you can see the picture behind him. I mean, he started his own zoo in Oklahoma, where people could get closer than any other reservation. He called it a zoo, not really a zoo. All these tigers there and whatnot, and he also became a recording artist, quote unquote, and released these music videos. He ran for president, ran for governor, hired someone to murder his rival. His rival also probably killed her husband and fed him to tigers. It's there are twists and turns throughout this thing that I was saying what the fuck pretty much every 10 minutes or so, just when they would drop new details. I mean, just like a 5-minute cameo within the second or third episode, they dropped the guy that Tony Montana from Scarface is based off of, to give a little bit of insight into his relationship with Joe Exotic and Doc Mantle, who's another tiger owning person in the country. And that's like a 5-minute thing where he basically like admits, like, or it's shown that he admitted in court that he took part in dismembering a body, after he claims he didn't kill the person, but someone else did, and he helped them dismember the body. And that's just like a 5-minute, like, drop in, drop out. We don't hear from him really ever again. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, you just had Scarface on the fucking thing, and this is like not even something that really catches much attention.
Right.
It's absurd. And I think that's the thing that really makes Tiger King so riveting. It's just like the story is something you really can't believe unless you see and see the reporting. Is it good TV? Probably not. It's garbage in a lot of sense.
Is it worth 7 hours?
Right?
7 episodes. That's long, right, for a docuseries.
It is. However, it didn't really feel too slow to me at any parts. Like there was just always so much new information coming through. I was kind of like, okay, like I can get down with this. I do think parts of it were maybe a little bit embellished or expounded upon again and again, but really for what it was and for the time it dropped, couldn't have been more perfect, because this is the type of thing that when you have a lot of captive eyes can really get a nice Twitter community going. And there's certainly a lot of memes out there. Do I agree with all of them or support them? No. Joe Exotic and pretty much everybody in this film is a piece of shit. And they're all pretty bad people. But it wasn't entertaining and killed 7 hours of my quarantine. Yeah, and I'm cool with that. So shout out to Netflix for blessing us with the Tiger King content. Have you seen any memes you really like about it?
No, honestly, I can't say I'm seeing too many of them. I'm really avoiding it, living in my own little bubble. So I know it's a meme factory, but whenever I see them, I just kind of scroll past. So it's one of those things I just decided I'm not gonna figure out what they mean and just let it pass. And I'm very happy to do that.
Probably for the best. My favorite one has just been people merging Joe Exotic's face onto Trump. Just feels very the two people who are kindred souls.
Yeah, sure they'd be friends.
Yeah, maybe he'll get a presidential pardon. Who knows? He's currently looking for it, at least, or asking for it. So. Anyways, why don't we move on to a little bit of maybe a better piece of content dropped by Netflix, Crip Camp, the 2020 Sundance Audience Award-winning documentary, which, speaking of presidents, this is produced by President Obama's production company that he started like 2 or 3 years ago. Directed by James LeBrecq and Nicole Newman. Is it Newhan? Newhan, sorry. Can't even read my own handwriting here. Apologies to Nicole Newhan. It follows the lives of people with disabilities who go to Camp Jened in 1971, which was not like an official person with disabilities camp, but it was a free-spirited camp that was aimed at people with disabilities. And it shows how the experience at this camp kind of sent some of these folks on a trajectory to become activists in the world of disabled people and to fight for disabled rights. Really moving documentary. I found myself tearing up quite a few times. I thought it was well told. Dave, how are you feeling after watching Crip Camp?
Oh yeah, I think it nails it, man. Crip Camp's really great. Really strikes home the just the need for empathy and understanding, and the tone it is done so well, because it's really about people with disabilities trying to lead active lives and pursuing, what they want to do, whether that's activism or their studies or just, whatever their interests may be. Is, a fair amount of characters that I say pop up throughout most of the doc, as we progress through the time. And, just it kind of restates, I think, in a great way, like the overall, I guess, message that disabled people always try and express to others, that just view them as people like you and I, and leave it at that. You don't have to like be super, super nice to me and like overprotective of me. I think they made a great point of pointing out while like the default well-intentioned efforts that perhaps their parents used to make back in the day when this was not something people talked about, also was not the right way to go about things, as well as people that are obviously being like really mean or whatnot. And then once we move past that and move towards like the fight activism aspect and the fight for disabled rights, and you think, it wasn't that long ago when handicap accessibility in like urban centers was just completely non-existent, and the doc, I think, the tone is so good because it grounds in specific people with like specific like interesting stories. And I guess having this like camp that brought people together and then kept them connected was like, I think almost a good framing device, but also kind of interesting too, because thinking of like camps back in like the 70s, as someone that used to work at a camp, it's a lot different than it is now in terms of like the smoking and the co-edness and the boundaries and lack thereof. Is kind of interesting. Yeah, I think it's really well done, and two for two or back-to-back years for Obama's production company, because of course American Factory was a big hit for them as well. So yeah, I really liked it.
I think you spoke on a really crucial point to this, which is with a topic this large, to especially talking about disabled rights, the fight and the activism for that, it would have been really easy to just kind of tell the history of the fight and to just kind of give the facts and show how things developed and highlight certain events. I think by kind of following, I think they picked like 4 or 5 people. They picked Larry Allison, Judith Heyman or Human, James Lebrecht, the director, and then Denise Scherzer Jacobson. Those were kind of like the 4 main ones that they followed. I think it gives such a sense of humanity to the documentary that I think is what propels this to be a great documentary. You take these stories and you take these people and their experiences, and to bring to light how the way things were back in the 70s and what that meant to each of these people individually, and then how that propelled them forward in their lives. Like, I don't remember which one of these 4 it was, but there was a woman with cerebral palsy who she tells a story about she was going to I think it was like treatment or something like that, and she ended up having sex with her bus driver. And then she talks about going to her gynecologist after the fact, and she had an STD, and they like almost couldn't believe that she had the STD. And
Right.
she basically said like, because people thought this is something I could never do, I wanted to do it. And even though something so small, you could see like the impact this had on her and her humanity and the way that she like saw the world. And I think those kind of stories, people talking, some of the interviews from the camp even talking about the lack of privacy that they had growing up, and seeing the camaraderie among those individuals relating to each other, you kind of see the impact that things had that way, and why this fight was so important, not only for the broader community, but for these people individually. And then to bring in some of those historical events as they talk about the activism. I think especially the shutdown of in New York City in that protest was just remarkable and jaw-dropping in a sense. It was really well done in terms of how they framed it, but then also how they kind of told the story moving through time.
Yeah, and like you said, connecting it to those events, I think the story of anti-war protesting and stuff during the Vietnam War, and of course civil rights movement having around the same time as well. The disabilities activism is not something you hear about nearly as much, despite being kind of intertwined with those two things. Mm-hmm. And I think it really kind of like caught my eye once they like realized that they almost needed disabled veterans, specifically veterans, to help them just to get more visibility. And yeah, it's just kind of interesting because again, like you think of how a lot of the institutions and how they've changed since the 70s, and obviously they I think do a good job when they kind of be very stark and honest and showing things like what was that Staten Island quote unquote hospital, what was it called, Hilderbrook or something, I forget the name, where a young Geraldo of all people is the one doing the expose, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't that long ago, man. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the docs, I'd recommend this to anyone just because I think it's both really informative, just in terms of getting you a lot of information about how things have changed, and also again because it's grounded in specific characters that I think do a really good job both in like the testimonials and also looking back with there's a lot of archival footage. It kind of gives you everything you want in a documentary. So I think it's really great. Miss Americana, Taylor Swift's doc, got I think more press, quote unquote, out of Sundance, but I think everyone has rightfully heralded Crip Camp as the superior doc of this year's Sundance. A little more important subject matter.
Yeah, I recommended this documentary to quite a few people already since seeing it. I think it's just important uh, because what we say matters, the way we treat people matters, right? And I think that that's kind of the thing that we see coming out of Obama's Higher Grounds production company is that um, he's highlighting stories that highlight the human American experience. I think American Factory tied in a little bit of how the global experience, especially China,
Mm,
has impacted the
right.
factory experience. But um, he's highlighting pieces of American life that tell important stories and relatable stories. And I hope he keeps making these because I think it's impressive. Obviously, in line with I think a lot of impressiveness from President Obama, but also important to be looking at these things. So, shout out to 44. Why don't we move on to some music though? We'll start with Lil Dragon. Dave, you're a big Lil Dragon fan, right?
I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. Actually, for the longest time, I would get Little Dragon confused with K-pop superstar G Dragon, and always forgot which one was which because you would see their names a lot because Little Dragon's been around for like 13 years. So
Yeah.
yeah, I always got the dragons mixed up.
Well, as long as you're not getting them mixed up with Imagine Dragons, because they make
Who could
much
do
more
that?
quality music. They bring more than just the thunder and the lightning. They bring excellent production and subtle songwriting that I think made their newest album, "New Me, Same Us," a pretty solid listen. I've never been huge into Little Dragon. I think I kind of it kind of depends on the song. I don't think I've had any albums that I've listened to that really grabbed me, but a couple of their bigger hits, especially like Wildfire, just a really well crafted, smartly done song. And uh, I think after 13 years, they're obviously masters of their craft. Um, but listening to this most recent album, it almost felt a little bit like a chill hop album in a
Yeah.
sense. Very much. If I wanted to listen to this album again, probably go sit in the park whenever we can get back outside, smoke a blunt, and just listen to this because it's just like a very vibey, mellow sounding album. How did you feel listening to New Me, Same Us?
Yeah, same. That down tempo dream pop uh, usually doesn't do a whole lot for me, but Yukimi Nagano, the lead singer, she kind of has an interesting voice, and it's oftentimes the whole uh, the fullness of the song is usually her singing a lot of the times when this again understated instrumentation and whatnot. But yeah, in this case, I feel like I kind of just floated in and out. There were songs that had their moments, like I like Sadness a lot. That one was a little more higher energy, and it was obviously nice to hear Kaliukus at the end. But um, yeah, it's funny because this is their sixth record, and when you've been an indie artist that long, you kind of just do what you want. And they've talked about this in interviews where they had lanes to pursue a more mainstream friendly sound. I mean, their fourth album got Grammy nominated and whatnot, but like they just weren't interested in that. And I obviously respect that. But for me, I'm kind of like you. Like it's really very much song to song for me because that down tempo stuff sometimes it's almost too vibey for me. But I respect it again. When you're indie that long, it's pretty cool to see people just kind of march into the beat of their own drum. But I mean, they've done features from time to time. You can look at their collaborations. You know, a lot of notable names like Flume and Kaytranada. They were on Little Sims last year. They were on Mac Miller way back. I liked her on Tinashe 2 albums ago. So yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that Kate Trinata type vibe. I think on a couple of the songs in the back half of this album, it reminded me a little bit of some of the songs off Kate Trinata's 99.9%.
Mm-hmm. That's where it is feature.
Yep, and it, I think I liked a couple more of the songs than you did. Are You Feeling Sad, which I liked both the Kaylee Ukis version and the just a Little Dragon version. I thought New Fiction was really good. The bass in that really stood out, and the bongos was a nice like touch and flourish there at the end. and Where You Belong, just like this like funky chill song, which I really vibe to. But yeah, I think the thing about Little Dragon for me, and I think you kind of touched a little bit on my feelings, is I didn't. There wasn't enough variation throughout this album for me to really find it super interesting. I think some of the songs started blending together for me or sounding a bit samey. And I respect, like you said, I respect their craftsmanship. I don't think any of these songs are poorly made, but I just think they sounded a little too in line for me to really feel like this album stood out. Fairly forgettable, but I think there's some good things to take away. I'm probably throw one of the songs on the playlist, so check that out. Nowstalgia Best of 2020. Why don't we move on to a singer-songwriter who I think I'm a little bit higher on than Little Dragon. Actually, I know I'm a lot higher on than Imagine Dragon or Little Dragon. Waxahatchee with her fifth album, St. Cloud, follow up to 2017's Out in the Storm. Did we review that one? I don't remember.
I think we talked on that. I mean, she had a short EP in 2018 as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely mentioned those. I don't remember if I listened to the 2017 album, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, in some regard, sure. But that's kind of what happens with indie artists. You talk about them, and then you wait for them to do new things. You talk about them again. They kind of fade away. But in this case, obviously, a lot to talk about because this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting because if you know Waxahatchee or know any of her former stuff, especially like her debut album, Cerulean Salt, or the American Weekend. Sorry, I think American Weekend was actually the debut album, and then Cerulean Salt was the follow up. Those albums rest on the strength of her songwriting, this like lo-fi, very like stark sounding production, and pretty simple, but like cutting like guitar work and drum production. It's very cold, I would say. Waxahatchee's introspective, and she's like tearing herself apart in a lot of ways. And Out in the Storm, a little bit more expansive, got really good critical reviews, but kind of in the same line where it's still kind of like introspective, a bit depressing, kind of looking at what's going on with Katie Crutchfield, who is Waxahatchee. What's so exciting about St. Cloud is it feels like such a change in direction, and this album is incredibly warm. Even if you look at the cover of Out in the Storm and then this cover, the colors in Out in the Storm are gray, it's like muted bluish kind of color, and it's just very much like like an old black and white movie, whereas this is so vibrant. She's on top of this Ford truck in this bright blue dress with the I don't know, what's that, roses in the back, and
I think so, yeah,
just really
getting her like, OG Lana Del Rey on.
Yeah, for real, very Lana Del Rey vibes on that cover, and the whole album just feels very warm, and it really blends that folky indie rock sensibility that Waxahatchee usually has with, like you've mentioned, Americana a couple times. That's kind of the key word for this. I think there's that like Americana, almost like singer-songwriter country vibe to this, and I think I think she pulled it off beautifully on St. Cloud. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Like I said, I didn't really remember much about her past work that I'd heard, but in this case, I think St. Cloud's really special because it leaves an impression on you in a relatively short amount of time without being too complicated. You kind of said this, like it's simple chords, it's simple acoustic guitar work, and it's just, cutting lyrics, and it's just really personal, bare bones music. And when that much personality can shine with relatively simple accoutrements around it, I think that that just makes for special music, especially in indie rock, where sometimes it can get a little kind of a little softly spoken. So it reminds me of what I like about Soccer Mommy as well. Just really rich vocals that really just shine. So it's a really easy to listen to, but if you listen closer, you hear that Katie's talking about becoming sober over the past few years, and Perhaps the stark change in imagery on the album covers reflects this kind of rebirth, regrowth for her. Just guessing, but maybe that has something to do with it. Yeah, so I really like the was it the guitars on was a War, and then I thought Fire, one of the more introspective songs. The drums really awesome there. So yeah, overall it's really great.
Yeah, and you talked about that the simpleness in her songwriting. I think she does a really good job of creating these really catchy, almost kind of like spin you around type choruses and verses, and kind of mixing that with these like layered guitar sounds. There's a lot of tracks where there's like this twangy like Stratocaster sound, and then you have the acoustic guitars kind of underneath, kind of plucking along to it. And it just sounds really beautiful. Organs are pretty heavily used on this album to kind of give that like livelier vibe. And I was just really impressed because you think about how artists so often try to change directions, and in a second we're going to be talking about artists who necessarily haven't changed directions maybe enough to really expand upon their style and their sound. But Waxahatchee almost seems to have used her becoming sober as a way to propel herself into a new lane in her music, while still holding true to what it means to be her as a singer-songwriter, with these very concise but cutting lyrics and introspective lyrics. And there seems to be an optimism to this album that I think just feels like Waxahatchee unlocked something for herself. I think Ruby Falls is a track that really stands out to me, as well as The Eye. Those both feel like that like blend of old school Waxahatchee with some more this like optimism. But yeah, I think this is probably one of my favorite albums of the year. Definitely up there with the Weekend After Hours from last week, which I'm still bumping quite often. And I heard the producer for this, Brad Cook, worked a lot with Bon Iver, and I think that makes a lot of sense because I hear a lot of like the newer Bon Iver production kind of throughout this, and almost kind of like a Jenny Lewis vibe to this as well from last year's On the Line. So there's just so much in this. I feel like I'm gonna have to listen 3 or 4 more times to really dissect all my thoughts, but it really impressive showing. And a 5th album. I can't believe she's been around that long, but go back and listen to her other work if you got some time.
Yeah, I think she's probably one of the more premier artists on her label. She's on Merge Records, which is one of those bigger indie labels like Matador. I was just looking at the roster they have, and I mean they have Connor Oberst, Destroyer, X Hex, and a lot of other acts, but a lot of them I don't recognize. So I think I was actually kind of surprised that she was still on one of the indie labels, because I feel like she's kind of been a known quantity for a while. But that's kind of cool still.
Connor Oberst, Bright Eyes might be making a comeback here soon. They're supposed to be. I think they announced something like that. So we'll reviewing them.
We need more content.
Give us the content. Pearl Jam gave us the content, Dave, with their
a gigaton of it.
That's such a bad joke. I actually didn't even write down which album this is. I'm gonna assume, I was gonna say 10th. That makes sense. And their first one in 7 years since Lightning Bolt dropped in 2013. Their last album before that was 2009's. Was it Backspin?
Yeah, something like that.
Backspacer, I think it was.
Most of their aughts albums don't matter to anyone except hardcore Pearl Jam fans, if we're being honest.
Well, right, and that's kind of thing. So I want to start with a theory, and then maybe we can work our way back to the album, right? So 90s rock, right? 90s grunge music. You had Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Chili Peppers. I wouldn't put them in the grunge, but they were still up there. No. Soundgarden.
Same time of year,
right?
Or time of origin. Yep.
Radiohead. Radiohead, and a lot of those bands had maybe higher peaks than Pearl Jam, but flamed out for different reasons. Obviously, like Kurt Cobain died and Nirvana was over. And then from those ashes rose Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters. That reminds me of like Alex Rodriguez, Nomar Garcia Parra from the early 2000s. Some of those players had really high peaks in their seasons. I think Pearl Jam is the Derek Jeter of their time of music, where they had this really extended, long career where they're still one of the best touring bands. Whenever they play live, they fucking kill it. And their career is just, they maintain a level of success and excellence that goes longer than most of their peers, but they're reaching the tail end when Jeter was batting like 280, driving in like 45 runs, 70 runs, and 15 home runs. And you're like, okay. And his range was always shitty, but you know, it's still decent.
Yeah. I think timeline wise, Derek Jeter was robbed of the MVP in 2006. I think by 2006, Pearl Jam was kind of shot. So I don't know if it totally tracks, but their longevity and I think their live performance reputation is what's connected to that. And they have this massive fan base that's led to them selling like 80 million records, whatever it is. And they haven't really been concerned with inventing anything new within themselves artistically in a very long time, probably since the 90s. But that's okay. They make music for themselves and for their big legion of fans. And because they are such great performers, they earn a lot of money doing that. And everyone seems to be satisfied. You know, a band like Radiohead is willing to reinvented themselves, you know, and a band like Red Hot Chili Peppers even had their most successful album in like 06, right? Like Stadium Arcadium is like, I think their best selling record, whether it should have been or not, that was still the case, you know, but right. Pearl Jam never got like excitement again, except from their hardcore fans who they had from the jump. So they're kind of an interesting act in that regard for me, because they've kind of just acted like a legacy act for 2/3 of their existence because they got so big so fast. Frankly, I think I care more about like their early fight against Ticketmaster, which failed, but like I think that's probably the most admirable thing they ever done. But I was never a huge Pearl Jam fan, partially because like my dad had he had 10 on CD, but he like never played Pearl Jam for me. So I never really listened to Pearl Jam at all for a very long time. Like I know like Even Flow, I know some of the big songs, but never really was exposed to their music at all. So I didn't come into them until they were already this mythological thing, you know? Mm-hmm. But what's your experience with them?
No one in my family growing up really listened to Pearl Jam. Honestly, it was a fairly sizable gap in my my rock history listening up until a few years ago. And obviously I'd heard some of the major hits, but I've been diving more and more into their discography. I saw them live 2018 at Fenway. Maybe it's 2017 at this point. I can't remember, but amazing live show. Played some deep cuts. I believe they had someone from Dinosaur Jr. come out and play with them, which was pretty cool. And you know, Vedder is he's a modern rock star, dude. He carries himself as such, and it's great to see. And they sound amazing. But I guess it was interesting because I was reading the Pitchfork review of Gigaton. I thought they made a pretty good point, which is, you know, Pearl Jam came together and pretty quickly rose to be one of the biggest bands of the 90s. And because of that, they never really had to like redefine their style or redefine their sound. They kind of just were able to like float at this like high level,
like a legacy act,
right? And so they rest their image on this like grungy like sound, but they're not really. There's a stadium filling anthem rock band.
And would you call them a jam band?
In concert, but not in studio. Okay. Like they're not like Fish, you know. Like they're a lot tighter than that. At least
like so they do really long live shows. Great experience for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. What's like the disparity of old school Hall of Fame Pearl Jam songs versus their new stuff? Like I'm sure they sprinkle in they'll sprinkle in this new album, of course, because it's brand new and they haven't had brand new stuff for the past who knows how many tours, but like, are they how much 2000s and on music are they even playing at these long ass sets? I'm sure they change it up, but it just feels like like the jamming nature of the live stuff. Everyone just really cares about those unimpeachable early songs, and that's all you'd hear. But I'm just guessing. I never seen them.
Well, Pearl Jam, I think they have like anywhere from 15 to 20 songs that you probably recognize if you were to like look through the list. So like, yeah, obviously like Alive is probably their most popular song, Even Flow. But like songs like Last Kiss, Yellow Ledbetter, Better Man, Jeremy, like people know these songs. Daughter, people know. So the thing is, like they sprinkle some of these songs in, but usually, at least from what I remember at Fenway, they would do like a couple of newer songs, then put in one of their like like the bottom of that 15 in, then go back to some of those, and they'd play like a couple of the big hits in a row.
Work up to it, yeah.
Yeah, it's smart, like they know what they're doing because they need to fill the time, but they also do it where they do like these crazy like guitar solos, and then give the drummer a solo. Like they keep the energy up. Vedder knows what he's doing. He's kind of like the driver of this, right? I guess, man. Maybe the comp isn't so much Pearl Jam, but Vedder as like Jeter, like comparison. Because like,
yeah, sure,
he still fucking got it, and I think he sounds really great on Gigaton, which seems like it's maybe wasn't their most cohesive album attempt, but I think Vedder still gives a really great vocal performance throughout, and I think he is still top of his game in terms of being a frontman.
Yeah, for me, like his warble, which is very, very distinct, very unique, stands out. I just can't get into it, which is annoying because like they're like a big loud band. They have all the other rock elements I like, but for whatever reason, it's just like the vocals just don't do it for me. So never been a big fan overall. Even if like their big hits, it's like, yeah, this is just not the kind of rock I like. But it's kind of interesting because Gigaton, again, like we've been saying, is Pearl Jam not really reinventing the wheel. There's some modern, I think, lyrics, right? They're observing things. There's some pretty blatant references to Trump and stuff. But like, would you like this attempt, Pearl Jam, kind of just do what they do, versus something like what Coldplay's done recently, where they try and like do something very different? Again, been around so long, rather than doing the same thing again, more or less, they do something else. Whereas Pearl Jam's like, yeah, we still got it. I'm Eddie Vedder. I'm a boss. Like, what do you prefer from like a late band like this? Like, do you want a Gigaton?
I think it's an interesting comparison, right? Because Pearl Jam, as we kind of mentioned, have been so established for so long in their career, and Coldplay also came up very quickly and became very famous very quickly in early 2000s rock. But I think the thing with Coldplay is when they went to like Viva La Vida, they really reinvented themselves there. Right. And that evolution just continued to a more and more poppy sound. So there's been this constant evolution with Coldplay, whereas Pearl Jam has almost like defiantly been has been resistant to trying something new and trying a new sound. And I do think they try some new things on here, like the lead single, was it Clairvoyant? Fuck, I lost it here on my page.
Oh, yeah. What's it called?
It's Clairvoyant.
That's a funny name.
Oh, Dance of the Clairvoyants.
Yes.
That's what it's called. Yes. That's like that will stand out of their catalog forever. People are going to hear that and be like, that was a Pearl Jam song? Like, what year did they try that? Just the production on that is so different. It sounds a lot more modern, like rock. It sounds like they're trying something there. I think you kind of hear some of that too in like Super Blood Wolf Moon. It's like very much like this like growly, which Vedder does growly well, but like the whole sound sounds growly and menacing, which I don't really associate with Pearl Jam, like this menacing sound. I kind of associate with them like a fuck you, but like a we're all in this together, like fuck everybody else type of sound. To go back to your question though, I think I prefer a band that tries something because I give them I give them the credit for that. They're putting themselves out there. Pearl Jam is very comfortable. I think the fact that they made this album 7 years later is interesting. You could have maybe just imagined they weren't going to make music anymore, so that maybe they feel like there's something new to it. But did you listen to the podcast with Simmons?
I did not. No, I did not listen to the but first full circle moment. No, I did not. Why was that? That was a long pod. Was anything gleaned on that? I did read that a lot of this stuff, like they Vedder added the vocals after the fact. Like this seemed to be a very like long, drawn out album creation, which is probably not the most artistically sound way to try and have message in your music. But I'm not going to tell them how to do it.
Yeah, this album is incredibly collaborative. That's the kind of thing that came out of it, where it's like every band member, they have their own thing going on, but they kind of contributed all this together. And Vedder said that he never had a doubt that they were going to release more music, and actually just like the years got away from them, which I find interesting because this album doesn't sound specifically like inspired by anything. I mean, there are some like certainly talking about like Trump and the lack of response in the world, and just kind of like the world's going to shit type of like mentality might be like the overall theme of this. But the way this album was put together, the sequencing doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You go from being a pretty like whirring rock song, like pretty driven rock song, to more like relaxed or downbeat tracks, and it feels just like you can't really get into it. I actually think the album hits stride the best near the end, with like the last three songs, Comes Then Goes, Retrograde, and River Cross, I thought were the most consistent and well-crafted songs, and they really like flowed together well. Downbeat Vedder, kind of surprising to me on this album.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a stark change, at least. Just thinking about the album and thinking about Pearl Jam really for the first time in a while for me. I was just thinking of like the last Foo Fighters album was it 2017, I think it was, and like the last Red Hot Chili Peppers album in like 16, I think. I kind of look at those three bands in tandem because they're like the three like mega 90s bands that are still around and still hugely successful today. And it's kind of weird seeing like the Chili Peppers are the ones that kind of rose up. Like they have like the biggest, I think, worldwide appeal. You can look at like the streaming numbers. They are substantially ahead of the other two. I think Pearl Jam and Foo Fighters are kind of even, which is kind of strange. Like I think like back in the 90s, people weren't saying that, right? Like Pearl Jam kind of quickly rose up and was like kind of the defining band. So that's kind of interesting to me. I mean, obviously, again, they're all too big to fail at this point, but
yeah,
kind of weird how that's gone.
Chili Peppers been around a little bit longer. They were like mid 80s.
That's right. Yeah, it was 89 the first one.
Yeah, by the time Pearl Jam really rose up, I think they were fairly established.
84. That's right. Yeah, they're a lot older. That's right.
But yeah, it's interesting. Who was the other band that you mentioned along with them?
Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters, yeah. And Foo Fighters were a little bit later. I mean, you think that was what, like 98, 99 that those first albums came out, so that they're a little bit spread out. But I think kind of what drives like, so Vedder is he's definitely a very charismatic guy when he's on stage, but behind the scenes he's very laid back. I don't see him doing a lot of like activism or really getting involved with other like outreach kind of stuff. Dave Grohl was on that coronavirus thing last night on Fox, fundraiser. He's out there a lot. He does a lot of interviews, very charismatic guy, made Sonic Highway. It's just kind of his style, is he likes to be out in front. And Kiedis and Flea are the same way. Their personalities in and of themselves. Where Pearl Jam has never really had that, and they've been kind of comfortable not being that like outgoing celebrity. So I think that probably plays a role into how people view them and their popularity now. Yeah, it's interesting. I do think there's some good tracks. And one track I want to shout out that I really liked a lot. I already mentioned Retrograde, Comes and Goes. 7 O'Clock I also thought was a pretty good track. I'll be adding one of those to our Nowstalgia best of, so definitely go give it a listen. And really, when you come to it, this is probably still some of the best rock music that's out there. Sad to say, but like when it comes to like,
it's the truth, man.
Yeah, when it comes to true rock music, Pearl Jam can still bring it. But when it comes to pop music, Man, Dua Lipa fucking owns. We're talking about her most recent, her second album, Future Nostalgia, or could we say that she could have named this Nowstalgia? I mean,
I
come
like
on.
to think she took inspiration from the OG fan in the States, me.
Yeah, she was watching your 2017 review and listening to it, and she's like, wow, got to give a shout out to my guy Dave. Dave, what do you think of this record?
It's fucking great, dude. Bangers, dude. All bangers. It is a great day, man. It is a great day.
You said no skips. Really? No skips?
I don't think so.
Wow.
Thankfully, it's short. If there was 20 more minutes, this was an hour long. Probably not the case. But yeah, I thought it was quite succinct. And unlike a lot of other regarded pop of the past few years, this is very, very throwback, dude. Like, to straight up completely 70s, 80s disco vibes at times. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of cool because we've seen her make that evolution into just dance pop full on. You know, that first record was not dance pop at all. It wasn't until after that success where she dropped One Kiss with Calvin Harris and Electricity with Ronson and Diplo, which won the Grammy. You know, then it was like, oh wait, there's like a true dance pop lane for Dua, and then she just took that to the next level with Future Nostalgia, and it's like now you're seeing like Madonna comps in terms of like the sonic ideas and stuff. So yeah, very, very, very exciting. You know, I mean, I really like the first single, Don't Start Now, which is again like a dance pop banger, and it's like, all right, wow, okay, like it's coming for sure. That was back in November, and then I wasn't sure if that was going to be like the full sound of the record, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised to hear that. So yeah, big fan.
Yeah, I agree. I think this album is really, really great. I wouldn't say that there's this is a no skip album for me. I think there's certainly like a couple of songs that really stand out, a couple that fade to the back for me, but overall, I'm really impressed. You know, the conversation we've been having recently, and I think we might have even had it on the pod, is, you know, is Dua Lipa really in that like top sphere of like pop artists in the United States? Worldwide, undeniable. She does numbers. If you look at even her Spotify, she's consistently top 10. After
right now, 5th in the world monthly listeners.
And I think after her 2017 self-titled debut, I think she had 7 or 8 singles that came out that all were in like the Billboard Top 100 at certain points or something like that.
Yep. It was kind of like a slow build. Like the album comes out in June of that year, some singles before that, and like New Rules, which is her, you know, her mega smash hit. It's like 1.3 billion on Spotify, over 2 billion on YouTube. I think it's the second most streamed Spotify song by a woman after Camila's Havana, and like the 17th most streamed song on Spotify overall. Like again, like the numbers go forever with that one, but like that was like her 6th single off the self-titled one. And like it was just kind of this like slow roll by Warner. You know, she signed to a major this whole time, and I was just curious because like at that time, like I found out a lot of the way I think everyone in the States did if they found out about it then at all, which was online, like on like a music blog, because like she was getting all that worldwide attention, as you said, but like there was really no attention here at all. Like you could see it on the charts. It was like she was not making huge chart runs, and then it started to happen. The wheels started to churn. And like now, it like you're saying, is she just full on like A-list worldwide? You know, I think she's gotten there. I was curious to see what her upcoming tour was going to look like here in the States, because last time she did a headlining tour was smaller rooms. Like I kind of kicking myself because in 2017 she did the House of Blues in Boston, which is a very small venue, and I thought about going and I didn't go. And it's like, well, that's never happening again. She's going to at least do small like arena shows now.
Yeah.
So
she's playing TD Garden this time.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and I think this is the type of album that even if it doesn't necessarily propel her to be like that household name, you know, like a Taylor Swift or a Beyonce, I think what does it establishes her as a true crafter of pop sound. Because I was really blown away with some of the production choices on this album. You mentioned kind of the theme. She seemed to really bring together 80s and 90s pop sounds on this. You mentioned the Madonna comp. I think it makes a lot of sense. Another comp I've been seeing thrown around about her is Kylie Minogue sound,
Yep.
which is like this like futuristic pop sound, and that's all over this. I would almost wonder if Kylie Minogue was like shadow producing this at points, because it sounds so in line. But there are some songs on here that are up there for me in terms of song of the year. Levitating is
That's the one.
maybe it's top two for me, top two songs of the year. It's just incredible.
Yeah. That's one that's like pop perfection songs, which is funny because I feel like Don't Start Now is another like kind of unimpeachable, hard to pick any holes in that kind of song. But in here, Levitating, there's like extra layers with that one, man. I think that's like the clear highlight, which is interesting because later on in the album, you have like her talking about the more feminist ideals she has publicly espoused from time to time. And now we're actually hearing that come up in her music. Obviously, that'd be the last track, Boys Will Be Boys. So, yeah, the union of the sound, I think, was really what stood out to me the most. But yeah, I think you're right. Levitating, man. That's the one I've definitely played the most thus far. It's a true banger.
It was an immediate repeat track for me on first listen. Go back, listen to it again. And I think what I really love so much about that is that the chorus is crafted in such a way that it just like sticks in your mind. But then it has like these nice production flourishes. There's these like distorted backing vocals behind the chorus, which really like catch your ear and kind of just like sit there. And then they use like a chorus sound to kind of drive the beat. Like they just kind of play it over and over. And I'm like, oof, this is beautifully done. And you already mentioned Don't Start Me Now, or Don't Start Now is definitely up there. Physical, another one of the singles, I think is really great, and that's one that's really in line with the Kylie Minogue sound to me.
That one's real. That's like, you can maybe argue that's like one of her maybe her best song ever, because that's like really different than I think she'd done before. And yeah, I think you're right. Like the influence of acclaimed artists of the past is pretty evident on that one. And like her like she's like a contralto voice, she's not Ariana with the soprano. You almost don't hear this voice from female pop stars nearly as much. And yet I think she really shines where she's able to really I think use the songwriting, use the production to help her, despite the fact that she still doesn't have like that top tier like vocal strength. Like she's not Ari or Demi, but like it's kind of like she's kind of like figured out like the way she wants to present herself in her music, which is funny because like I remember like the first criticisms I used to see of her was like that she was like not really emotive at all, and it would really come out in like her videos and her live performances. And partially that is like she was kind of a mediocre dancer and stuff. But now I think people are almost taking that and be like, no, that's kind of like the persona she had. She's almost like aloof or like not like about like the bullshit, So maybe I'm projecting too much with that, but I think that's kind of cool. One thing I will say, what are your thoughts on her hair, the blonde and black mix? I've seen a lot of thoughts on that online.
Really? I think she's an incredibly beautiful person, and her hair has never struck me as good or bad. So I'll stay away from it. Dave, what's your take on it, though? I'm interested.
I actually don't mind. I think the blonde looks good. But
are people saying it doesn't look good?
No, I saw some like hate. They're like, even though this album is a 10 out of 10, let's not make the blonde and black a thing. Stuff like that.
Oh man, I think she's great. So I'm down with the blonde. Keep it if you want, Dua. Yeah. So I guess Dave, I want to ask, because I hear you saying this is no skips. The Weeknd is no skips. Is this like top 5 albums, top 2 albums for you this year so far?
Oh yeah. It's so funny hearing this in The Weeknd in successive weeks. And actually, we weren't supposed to get this album till Friday, but I guess this Dua's second album is probably one of the more notable full-on leaks in quite some time, and that had to have factored in. It was not publicly stated as such, but you figure pushing it up a week due to the album already being out there. So that's probably part of it. But yeah, this and After Hours, I think, are my top 2 so far. But I have a lot of like songs I've really liked, but yeah, I think these are my 2 favorite records. And because the other 2, I think for me, that both it's kind of music I like, but also that they're really kind of focused in like both sonically and the message of what the artist wants to do. Whereas something like Uzi, Love Eternal take a lot, but that's not exactly the most coherent thing start to back. So I wouldn't hold it up to this level. But yeah, I just want to shout out Anwar Hadid, Dua's boyfriend, who I think has had some inspiration on this. And this is, again, a week after Bella Hadid had some inspiration for different reasons on the Weeknd's album. And if only Gigi Hadid would have the same effect on Zayn, because Zayn is a very disappointing artist at this time.
You're just trolling at this point.
No, I genuinely believe that, though. I think Zayn low-key sucks. And as the first guy to break away from One Direction, you would have thought that wouldn't have been the case. So, work on that, Zayn. What's you're back together now? Let's figure it out.
I'm not up to date on all these celebrity relationships, so thank you for informing me of that, Dave. Any last thoughts on Dua before we wrap up?
She won Best New Artist at the Grammys last year. Seems like one of the rare good selections by the Grammys. Best New Artist, kind of a cursed award.
Yeah.
Like 3 out of 5 usually don't go well, something like that, you know? Also on Good in Bed on this album.
Hell yeah.
Which is a great song. I dedicate this verse to all that good pipe in the moonlight. Love it. Spill that tea. But that's produced by Take a Day Trip, which is notable because they're, I think, one of the more rising hip-hop producers of late. Of course, they produced Mo Bamba and Panini for Lil Nas X, Rodeo, a bunch of other songs at this point. So you look at the liner notes on Future Nostalgia. It's not like After Hours. There's no like Max Martins on this. There's no like huge names. I think like apart from like Tuvlo and Julia Michaels on like one song, it's kind of like lesser known movers and shakers, which I think is kind of cool because at the end of the day, Dua is still signed to a big 3 label. Like she's kind of their main pop focus for Warner. So that's kind of cool that she seems to be so really in control of what she's doing.
Shout out to Dua. Shout out to Future Nostalgia, one of our favorite albums of the year so far, especially Dave's. Dave, you mentioned some smaller movers and shakers. Are we going to be tuning into more smaller movers and shakers to fill the time coming up? What do we got on the docket?
Thundercat, new album.
Okay.
Got Empress of, who I actually like her a lot. She's kind of this very, very not famous American pop artist. That's all I have for like new releases. Lady Gaga was supposed to be coming in 2 weeks. She's already canceled. So it doesn't feel like surprise music releases are going to be that common, except for, I suppose, in hip hop. But yeah, so we're going to talk about XXL Freshman next week, which is only a few weeks ahead of when we did it last year anyway. So it's about that time regardless. And we'll see if there's any like ghost drops on streaming. Of course, Hulu surprised everyone with Portrait of a Lady on Fire last week. Granted, we already talked about that. So, I mean, I know you've seen that now as well. So we'll see if Netflix has anything. I feel like they're still kind of riding the Tiger King wave out, you know? So HBO's still kicking, but there's nothing new this week.
Netflix said they have like 64 new things to drop. We're heading into April. I'm assuming we'll get something. So, well, there will be stuff to talk about, I'm sure. My quick 20-second review of A Portrait of a Lady on Fire is the scene where they do drugs in their armpits. Fucking dope. The chemistry between the two leads is like, it crackles on the screen. And I've never had a movie where like so little happens that like I'm so riveted by. So if you haven't seen it and you have Hulu, which most of you I would assume do, especially if you have Spotify, you can get it for free. Go check it out. Or it's like $3 extra a month, something like that.
So it was $3 extra a month, then it became free, and now you no longer can get that deal.
Oh, damn.
But so I've looked, and we're not getting kicked off anytime soon. So I assume Disney's going to be like, fuck this, you got to pay soon, but not yet.
They might just throw that in as a bundle. I don't know. Disney. Corporate overlords. Anyways, until next week, go listen to all the albums we talked about and get back to us at Nowstalgia. Follow our playlist at Nowstalgia Best of 2020. Jesus Christ. And give us a 5-star rating review on iTunes and subscribe on YouTube. Peace out.